The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with the voices of 847 different species. Ambassador Taman Park sat in his designated seat, reviewing his notes for today's trade dispute discussions. He had been Earth's representative for 3 years now, and these meetings had become routine. The humans were still newcomers here, having joined the Council only 50 years ago, but they had earned respect through careful diplomacy and fair dealing. Tamin adjusted his dark blue diplomatic uniform and glanced around the massive chamber. The ceiling stretched high above, filled with floating platforms that held representatives from worlds he could barely pronounce. Some breathed different gases, others needed special temperature controls, but they all came together here to maintain peace across the galaxy. Captain So Young Kim sat in the gallery above, watching everything with sharp eyes. She wore her military uniform, but no weapons were allowed in the council chambers. Still, her presence reminded everyone that Earth took these meetings seriously. She had fought in the last conflicts on Earth before humanity reached the stars, and her experience showed in the way she carried herself. High Arbiter Quindal called the session to order. The ancient crystalline being's voice rang out clearly, translated into hundreds of languages simultaneously. Today we address the mining rights dispute between the Centauri colonies and the Rigel Commonwealth. The discussion went smoothly at first. Taman presented humanity's position as mediators, offering a solution that would benefit both sides. Several other species nodded in agreement. This was what humans did best, finding middle ground, building bridges between opposing factions. Then Councillor Vexhera rose from her platform. The Naga representative was 7 feet tall, with scales that shifted from green to gold depending on her mood. Right now they were deep red with anger. Her serpentine body coiled as she prepared to speak, and her voice carried across the chamber with deadly precision. "Before we continue with this trivial matter," Vexhara said, her forked tongue flickering, "I must address a far more serious issue: the continued presence of humans in our council." A murmur ran through the chamber. This was unexpected. Taman felt his pulse quicken, but kept his face neutral. So Young leaned forward in her seat above, her hands gripping the rail. "For 50 years, Vexhara continued, we have watched these creatures play at diplomacy. They speak of peace, of cooperation, of finding solutions without conflict. But what they really show us is weakness. Pathetic genetic weakness." The chamber fell silent. Even the background hum of life support systems seemed to quiet. Taman's datapad creaked in his grip, but he forced his voice to remain steady. "Councillor Vexhara, if you have concerns about human policy, perhaps we could discuss them in the proper forum." Silence. Vexhara's tail slammed against her platform. "I am not finished. In 50 years of membership, have we ever seen humans engage in proper warfare? Have they ever shown the strength that true civilized species require? No, they cower behind their pretty words and their mediator roles because they lack the spine for real conflict." Other representatives began to stir. A few nodded in agreement. Councillor Theckmore, whose insectoid people had recently lost a territorial dispute, clicked his mandibles approvingly. "The Naga speaks truth. Humans always seek the easy path. They are decorative pacifists," added Representative Yulfin from her aquatic tank. "Beautiful to look at, pleasant to speak with, but useless when real strength is needed." Taman stood slowly, his movements controlled despite the fire building in his chest. "Distinguished colleagues, humanity has contributed greatly to galactic peace. Our mediation has prevented 3 wars in the past decade alone." "Prevented wars." Vexhara laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Yes, because you fear them. You are genetically incapable of true conflict. Your species evolved to run from danger, not face it. You dream of war because you know you could never survive one." More voices joined the attack. Representative after representative stood to share their opinions of human weakness. They spoke of humanity's gentle integration into galactic society as proof of cowardice. They mocked the human tendency to seek peaceful solutions as evidence of evolutionary failure. "In all our databases," called out Councillor Zephyric, "there is no record of humans ever winning a significant military victory. Their own planet shows no signs of the great conflicts that forged strong species." So Young's knuckles were white now as she gripped the gallery rail. Her training screamed at her to intervene, but protocol demanded she remain silent unless directly threatened. Taman's diplomatic mask was cracking. 50 years of careful relationship building was crumbling around him. But he held his ground, speaking with the measured tone he had perfected over years of service. Honored counselors, humanity prefers diplomacy because we have seen the costs of conflict. We choose peace because we understand its value, not because we fear war. Pretty words, Vexhara hissed, but we see through them. You choose peace because you have no choice. Your species simply lacks the capability for anything else. The attack continued for over an hour. Representative after representative stood to pile their scorn on humanity. They questioned human intelligence, human courage, human worth to the galactic community. Some suggested that humans should be reclassified as a client species rather than full members. Through it all, Taimin stood and took it. His responses remained diplomatic, measured, appropriate. But inside, something was changing. Each insult, each sneer, each dismissive wave of a claw or tentacle added to a growing fire. Finally, High Arbiter Quindal called for order. The Council will now vote on the motion to censure humanity for failing to contribute meaningfully to galactic defense initiatives. The vote was swift and brutal. 634 species voted in favor. Only 213 stood with humanity. The censure passed easily. The motion carries, Quindal announced. Let it be recorded that the Galactic Council finds humanity lacking in the martial virtues required of full membership. This censure will remain on record until such time as humans demonstrate their capacity for proper conflict. Taimin bowed formally, his face still controlled. The human delegation acknowledges the Council's decision. We will convey your concerns to our government. But as he gathered his materials and prepared to leave, So Young could see the change in his posture. His movements were too precise, too controlled. She had seen that look before, in soldiers who had reached their breaking point but were still holding on through sheer discipline. As the session ended and representatives began filing out, many cast dismissive glances at the human delegation. Some whispered among themselves, already discussing how to capitalize on humanity's diminished status. None of them noticed the way Taimin's hands shook slightly as he packed his datapad. None of them saw So Young's predatory smile as she watched them leave. And none of them understood that they had just made the worst mistake in galactic history. They had insulted humanity's honor, and soon they would learn what that really meant. Taimin Park sat in his private quarters aboard the diplomatic station, staring at the wall screen. For the third time, he replayed the recording of today's council session. Each viewing made the words sting worse. War-Dreadin, genetically incapable, decorative pacifists. The door chimed softly. Come in, he said, not turning around. Dr. Haiwan Lee entered carrying 2 cups of coffee. She had been his friend since their academy days on Earth, and now served as the human delegation's xenobiologist. Her usually bright expression was troubled as she handed him a cup. You should stop watching that, she said, settling into the chair beside him. Should I? Taimin's voice was flat. Should I just pretend that the entire Galactic Council didn't spend 3 hours calling my species cowards? Haiwan studied his face. In all their years of friendship, she had never seen him like this. Taimin was known throughout the diplomatic corps for his endless patience. Other ambassadors joked that he could stay calm during a supernova, but now there was something dangerous in his eyes. I've been monitoring the galactic communication networks, she said quietly. This wasn't random, Taimin. They've been planning this for months. He finally turned to look at her. What do you mean? Haiwan pulled out her data tablet and showed him a series of encrypted messages she had decoded. Look at these transmission logs. Vexhara has been in contact with at least 30 other species representatives. They've been coordinating this attack on our reputation. Taimin read through the messages, his jaw tightening with each line. The plan was laid out clearly. Paint humans as weak and useless, then use that narrative to exclude them from lucrative defense contracts and strategic alliances. It was all about money and power, disguised as concern for galactic security. They think we're soft, he said, his voice getting harder. They think we're easy marks. The door chimed again. This time, Captain So Young Kim entered without waiting for permission. Her military bearing was even more pronounced than usual, and her face was grim. We need to talk, So Young said. Both of you. She activated a privacy shield around the room, ensuring their conversation couldn't be monitored. Then she sat down and pulled out her own datapad. I've been doing some digging of my own, So Young began. This goes deeper than just diplomatic embarrassment. I've intercepted intelligence suggesting that several species are planning to use today's censure as justification for military action. Military action? Haiwan asked, alarmed. Not against Earth directly, So Young clarified. But they're talking about protecting human colonies from threats we're supposedly too weak to handle ourselves. Forced protectorates. They want to take control of our territory while making it look like they're doing us a favor. Tae-min stood up abruptly, nearly knocking over his coffee. They think they can just take what we've built? Because we prefer diplomacy to war? That's exactly what they think, So Young confirmed. In their minds, we're sheep pretending to be equals, and sheep don't get to keep what belongs to wolves. For a long moment, the three friends sat in silence. Outside the viewport, stars wheeled slowly in the darkness. Somewhere out there was Earth, humanity's birth world, where billions of people lived in peace because their leaders had chosen cooperation over conflict. There's something else, Haiwan said softly. I've been analyzing the other species' military capabilities. Tae-min, most of them have never fought a real war. Their conflicts are limited, formal affairs with rules and honor codes. They genuinely don't understand what total war looks like. What do you mean? Tae-min asked. They think war is what they do. Controlled aggression with agreed-upon limits. Territory disputes where armies meet in open field battle until one side yields. They don't know about other kinds of warfare. So Young's smile was sharp and cold. They don't know about human warfare. Tae-min walked to the viewport and stared out at the stars. His reflection looked back at him, a man in his 40s, gray at his temples, lines around his eyes from years of careful diplomacy. He looked tired, civilized, peaceful. He looked exactly like what the Council expected humans to look like. I want you to send a message to Earth, he said finally, to the historical archives. I want everything. Complete records of every conflict in human history. Casualty figures, strategic innovations, weapon development, psychological warfare techniques, everything. Tae-min, Haiwan said carefully. What are you planning? He turned back to face them and both women felt a chill. There was something different in his expression now, something that hadn't been there an hour ago. They want to know what humans are really like, he said. They think we're weak because we choose peace. They think we avoid war because we can't fight. Maybe it's time they learned the truth. So Young leaned forward, her eyes bright with interest. You're going to tell them about our history? I'm going to show them, Tae-min said. The next council session is in 3 days. That gives us time to prepare a presentation that will correct their misconceptions about human nature. The Diplomatic Council won't approve that approach, Haiwan warned. They'll want you to make a formal apology and try to smooth things over. The Diplomatic Council isn't here, Tae-min replied. I am, and I'm tired of apologizing for being human. He activated his personal communicator and sent a priority message to Earth. The request was simple but comprehensive. He wanted access to every piece of documentation about human warfare, from the earliest tribal conflicts to the last battles before humanity reached the stars. Within hours, the responses began flowing in. Military historians, archivists, and analysts worked around the clock to compile the information. The data stream that reached the diplomatic station was massive. Thousands of years of human conflict, reduced to statistics and tactical analyses. As the information poured in, the three friends worked through the night to organize it into a coherent presentation, but they discovered amazed even them. I never realized, Haiwan said, reading through casualty reports from Earth's 20th century. 60 million deaths in just one conflict? How is that even possible? Humans are very good at killing other humans, So Young said matter-of-factly. We just choose not to anymore. Tae-min was reading a tactical analysis of something called the 30 Years' War. His face was pale, but his voice was steady. They think we're weak because we negotiate. They don't understand that we negotiate because we know what the alternative looks like. By the second day, they had assembled a presentation that would have made a military academy professor proud. It covered everything: the development of increasingly sophisticated weapons, the evolution of strategic thinking, the psychology of warfare, the economics of conflict, but more than that, it told the story of a species that had perfected the art of war and then chose to walk away from it. Are you sure about this? Haiwan asked as they finished the final preparations. Once you show them this, there's no going back. Everything changes. Tae-min saved the presentation file and closed his computer. Outside, the diplomatic station continued its slow rotation, and representatives from hundreds of worlds went about their daily business, secure in their assumptions about the nature of the universe. Good, he said simply. It's time for a change. The breaking point had been reached. Now came the reckoning. The data kept coming. For 2 days straight, Earth's archives transmitted everything they had about human warfare to the diplomatic station. Taemin, Haiwan, and So Young worked in shifts, trying to process the massive flood of information. Historian Junho Yang appeared on their communication screen from his office on Earth. Behind him, shelves stretched to the ceiling, filled with books and data drives containing humanity's military history. His usually cheerful face was serious as he spoke. Ambassador Park, I've compiled what you requested, but I have to warn you, this material is disturbing. We archived most of it precisely because we wanted to move beyond this part of our nature. Show me, Taemin said simply. Junho's presentation began with charts and numbers that seemed impossible. In just the past 1,000 years, humans had fought over 250 major wars. The casualty figures were staggering. Conflicts that killed millions, weapons that could destroy entire cities, strategic campaigns that lasted for decades. The Great War of 1914 to 1918, Junho explained, killed approximately 20 million people. But that was just the beginning. The Second Global Conflict claimed over 60 million lives in 6 years. And those were just the largest conflicts. Yiwan stared at the numbers in disbelief. How did we survive as a species? By getting better at it, So Young said grimly. Look at the technological development timeline. The progression was terrifying in its efficiency. Humans had gone from fighting with sticks and stones to developing weapons that could crack continents. Each war drove innovation. Each conflict pushed the boundaries of what was possible in organized violence. Nuclear weapons, Junho continued, were developed in less than 4 years once we decided we needed them. The first test generated heat equivalent to the sun's core. By the end of that century, we had enough nuclear weapons to destroy Earth's surface several times over. But we never used them again after the first 2, Taemin observed. No, Junho agreed, because we learned what they could do. That's the pattern throughout human history. We develop increasingly terrible weapons, use them once to see their effects, then step back in horror at what we've created. The presentation moved through chemical warfare, biological weapons, cyber warfare, psychological operations. Each field showed the same pattern of rapid innovation, followed by voluntary restraint. Humans had developed ways to kill that other species couldn't even imagine. Admiral In-Soo Kang joined the conference from Earth's military headquarters. The old soldier's face was weathered by decades of service, and his voice carried the weight of experience. The young ones today don't understand, Admiral Kang said. They think peace was always our natural state. But I remember the last conflicts before we reached the stars. I remember what we were capable of when we stopped holding back. Tell them about the psychological warfare, So Young suggested. Admiral Kang's expression darkened. Humans are uniquely gifted at understanding how other minds work. We developed techniques for breaking enemy morale that were so effective, we banned ourselves from using them. Propaganda, misinformation, targeted assassination of key leaders, turning populations against their own governments. We could destroy a civilization without firing a shot. Taemin was taking notes furiously. This was exactly what he needed. Not just the raw numbers, but the strategic thinking behind them. What about innovation in the field? He asked. Adaptability under pressure? No species in our databases matches human tactical flexibility, Admiral Kang replied. Most aliens fight according to rigid doctrines. Humans improvise. We adapt to any situation, use any available resource, exploit any weakness. In our military academies, we have a saying, if you're not cheating, you're not trying hard enough. A soft chime indicated an incoming message. Librarian Kethril appeared on screen, an avian being with bright blue feathers and intelligent golden eyes. She worked in the station's central archives and had become friendly with the human delegation over the years. Ambassador Park, Kethril said quietly. I hope you don't mind the interruption. I've been curious about your recent research requests. I took the liberty of accessing the galactic military databases to see how human capabilities compare to other species. What did you find? Taemin asked. Kethril's feathers ruffled nervously. It's unsettling. Most species in the Council have fought perhaps a dozen significant conflicts in their entire history. Their weapons are designed for specific tactical situations. Their strategies are based on honor codes and formal rules of engagement. She paused, her head tilting in the way avians did when distressed. Humans appear to be the only species that has ever developed the concept of total war, conflict with no rules, no limits, no civilian sanctuary. The only species that has created weapons specifically designed to target non-combatants as a strategic necessity. We moved beyond that, Haiwan said defensively. Yes, Kethril agreed. But you had to move beyond it because you perfected it first. Most species never even conceived of such tactics. The implications were staggering. While other galactic civilizations had evolved controlled, limited forms of conflict, humans had developed warfare as a comprehensive art form. They had explored every possible method of inflicting damage, controlling populations, and breaking enemy resistance. And then they had voluntarily given it up. There's something else, Admiral Kang added. Our current defense systems, the ones the Council considers barely adequate, they're actually scaled-down versions of invasion protocols. We designed them to look defensive because we didn't want to alarm anyone. What do you mean? Taman asked. Our planetary defense grids can be reconfigured as siege bombardment systems in about 6 hours. Our exploration vessels carry enough firepower to crack a moon. Our colonization equipment includes automated manufacturing systems that can produce military hardware at an exponential rate. The room fell silent as the full picture emerged. Humanity hadn't joined the Galactic Council as equals seeking peace. They had joined as conquerors choosing restraint. How long would it take, Taman asked carefully, to activate full military production if we needed to? Theoretical question? Admiral Kang asked with a slight smile. Completely theoretical. 48 hours to retool the factories. Maybe a week to bring the mothballed fleets back online. A month to train new crews if we needed to expand beyond current reserves. So Young whistled softly. We could go from peaceful neighbors to galactic superpower in less time than it takes most species to mobilize their existing forces. But we choose not to, Taman said firmly. That's what they don't understand. They think our restraint comes from weakness. They don't realize it comes from strength. Junho nodded from Earth. That's the story of our entire species, Ambassador. We didn't stop fighting because we lost the ability. We stopped because we won so completely that continuing would have been pointless. As the research session ended, Taman sat back in his chair and considered what he had learned. For 50 years, humanity had carefully presented itself as a peaceful, diplomatic species. They had hidden their true capabilities behind polite smiles and measured words. The Galactic Council had interpreted this as weakness. They had no idea they were looking at predators who had simply chosen to become vegetarians. Are you really going to show them all of this? Hwan asked. Taman looked at the compiled data. Thousands of years of human conflict, innovation, and strategic thinking. It was a history of violence that would shock any civilized species. It was also proof of humanity's ultimate triumph over its own nature. They called us War-Dreadin, he said quietly. They think we dream of war because we fear it. Maybe it's time they learned that we dream of war because we remember what it was like to be very, very good at it. The research was complete. Now came the hard part, deciding how much of the truth the galaxy was ready to hear. The Grand Chamber was fuller than usual. Word had spread that the human ambassador would address the council about the recent censure. Many species had come to witness what they expected would be humanity's formal apology and acceptance of their diminished status. Counselor Vexhara coiled on her platform with visible satisfaction. She had spent the past 3 days giving interviews to galactic media, explaining why humans were unfit for full council membership. The support had been overwhelming. Finally, the galaxy was ready to put these weak, peace-loving creatures in their proper place. Ambassador Sujin Bei, Earth's senior diplomat, had arrived that morning via emergency transport. She sat in the observer section, her face carefully neutral. She had tried to convince Taman to follow standard protocol, apologize, promise to do better, and slowly rebuild relationships through quiet diplomacy. Taman had politely ignored her advice. High Arbiter Quindal called the session to order. Ambassador Park has requested extended speaking time to address the recent council decision regarding humanity's status. The floor is yours, Ambassador. Taman stood slowly, adjusting his diplomatic uniform one final time. Behind him, a massive holographic display activated, showing the seal of the United Earth Government. His voice when he spoke was calm and measured, exactly the tone everyone expected from the human representative. Distinguished colleagues, he began, I come before you today to address the misconceptions about human nature that led to our recent censure. It seems there has been some confusion about why humanity prefers diplomatic solutions to military ones. Scattered chuckles rippled through the chamber. Several representatives exchanged knowing looks. Here it comes, they thought. The excuse-making, the pleading for understanding. To clarify these misconceptions, Taman continued, I have prepared a brief overview of human history. I believe it will help you understand our perspective on conflict resolution. The display behind him changed, showing a timeline stretching back thousands of years. Simple bar charts indicated the frequency and scale of conflicts throughout human development. Humans have been engaged in organized warfare for approximately 8,000 years, Taman said conversationally. In that time, we have fought 2,347 documented wars. Of those, 251 qualify as major conflicts by galactic standards. The numbers were large, but not shocking. Most species had fought dozens of wars over their history. Vexhara's tail twitched with impatience. This was supposed to be an apology, not a history lesson. Let me share some specifics, Taman said. The display changed to show casualty figures. The 30 Years' War, 8 million dead. The Mongol conquests, 30 million dead. World War I, 20 million dead. World War II, 60 million dead. Now there were murmurs of concern. Those numbers were higher than expected, but still within the range of what advanced civilizations might achieve in their worst conflicts. The interesting part, Taman continued, his voice still perfectly calm, is not the scale but the innovation. You see, humans have a unique talent for warfare. We never stop improving. The display showed weapon development timelines. The progression from clubs to swords to guns to artillery happened quickly, but still seemed normal. Then the timeline reached the 20th century, and the pace of change became frightening. Chemical weapons developed to kill in new ways that conventional arms couldn't match. Biological weapons, designed to spread death through entire populations. Nuclear weapons capable of destroying cities in seconds. The chamber was growing quieter now. These weren't the weapons of a weak species. But the real innovation wasn't in the tools, Taman said, and his voice began to carry an edge. It was in the thinking. Humans developed strategic concepts that other species never imagined. The display changed to show tactical diagrams. Total war. The complete mobilization of entire civilizations for conflict. Unrestricted submarine warfare. Attacking civilian targets as a strategic necessity. Strategic bombing. Destroying enemy industrial capacity and civilian morale simultaneously. Psychological warfare. Breaking enemy resistance without physical engagement. Representative Yulfin's aquatic tank bubbled nervously. These tactics violated every civilized rule of engagement she knew. We developed the concept of acceptable losses. Taman continued, his diplomatic mask beginning to slip. The idea that you could sacrifice millions of your own people to achieve a strategic objective. We created detailed plans for fighting wars that would last decades, cost billions of lives, and leave entire planets uninhabitable. Now the chamber was truly silent. Even the background system seemed muted. We built weapons that could sterilize continents. We created plagues that could wipe out species. We designed strategies for fighting wars in space, on planets, in the deep ocean, in the centers of stars. Vexhara's scales had shifted from their confident gold to a nervous green. This wasn't going according to plan. And then, Taman said, his voice rising for the first time, we looked at what we had created, and we stopped. The display changed to show Earth as it appeared today, blue and green and peaceful, with orbital habitats and space elevators reaching toward the stars. We didn't stop because we lost the ability to fight, Taman continued, abandoning his prepared remarks entirely. We stopped because we won. We won so completely, so totally, that there was no one left to fight except ourselves. And when we realized what that meant, we made a choice. He turned to face Vexhara directly. You want to know why we seek peace? Because we know the alternative. We've perfected it. We've explored every possible way that intelligent beings can hurt each other, and we decided we were done. His voice was no longer diplomatic. It was the voice of a man who had reached his limit. You call us war-dreading? You're damn right we are. We dream of war every night because we remember what it was like to be very, very good at it. We dream of the weapons we haven't built, the strategies we haven't used, the campaigns we haven't fought, and we wake up every morning and choose not to. The chamber was frozen in stunned silence. You think our restraint comes from weakness? Tayman's laugh was harsh and bitter. Our restraint comes from strength. We don't fight because we don't have to. We've already won every war we've ever needed to win. Security Chief Dong-Hyun Lim watched from his position near the chamber's main entrance. His hand hovered near the emergency controls, ready to evacuate the human delegation if the situation turned violent. But his eyes were bright with pride as he watched his ambassador finally speak truth to power. So yes, Tayman said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried throughout the vast chamber. We are war-dreading. We dread war the way a master craftsman dreads being forced to practice his art on unwilling subjects. We dread war the way a reformed alcoholic dreads the bottle, not because we can't handle it, but because we know exactly what happens when we do. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives who had spent days mocking human weakness. You want to see what we're really capable of? You want to test whether humans can fight? I suggest you reconsider, because if we ever decide that diplomacy has failed, if we ever conclude that peaceful coexistence is impossible, then you'll learn why we spent 50 years trying so desperately to avoid that outcome. The silence stretched on for nearly a full minute. 800 species sat frozen, trying to process what they had just heard. Finally, High Arbiter Quindal found his voice. Ambassador Park, are you saying that humanity has been holding back? Tayman straightened his uniform and returned to his diplomatic posture, but his eyes remained hard. I'm saying, High Arbiter, that humanity joined this council not as equals seeking peace, but as conquerors choosing restraint. We didn't come here because we needed protection. We came here because everyone else did. He gathered his materials and prepared to leave. The censure stands, of course. Humanity accepts that we have failed to contribute adequately to galactic defense. We will endeavor to correct this oversight. As he walked toward the exit, his final words echoed through the chamber. After all, we wouldn't want anyone to think we're war-dreading. The door closed behind him, leaving 800 species to contemplate a universe that had suddenly become a much more dangerous place. The silence in the grand chamber lasted exactly 93 seconds. Commander Ye Jin-Oh had counted, standing in the security booth with her hand ready on the emergency evacuation controls. Then all hell broke loose. Representative Cole Dash of the warrior clans was the first to react, his forearms gesturing wildly as he shouted demands for immediate military action against humanity. Strike them before they become a threat, he roared, his massive frame trembling with rage. But Councillor Melthus of the ancient ethereal collective raised a translucent hand for silence. Her voice, when it came, carried the weight of 10,000 years of civilization. And prove their point? Demonstrate that we resort to violence the moment we feel threatened? Some of us remember what wisdom looks like. The chamber erupted into chaos. Species divided immediately into 3 camps. Those demanding preemptive action, those calling for appeasement, and those scrambling to reassess everything they thought they knew about galactic politics. Vexhara remained coiled on her platform, scales shifting rapidly through colors that indicated confusion, fear, and growing dread. Her coalition, so unified 3 days ago, was fragmenting before her eyes. Several species had already sent private messages to the human delegation, requesting urgent diplomatic meetings. High Arbiter Quindal struggled to maintain order, but the revelations had shattered decades of assumptions. The council session devolved into a shouting match in 47 languages, with translation systems overheating from the sheer volume of panicked communication. In his quarters, Tayman sat quietly with Hewan and So Young, monitoring the chaos through their communication networks. Reports were flooding in from across the galaxy as news of his speech spread. The Rigel Commonwealth just offered us exclusive mining rights to their outer systems, Hewan reported, scrolling through diplomatic messages. The Centauri Federation wants to discuss mutual defense arrangements, and the Vegan Trade Union is asking if we'd consider providing security for their shipping routes. Fear is a wonderful motivator, So Young observed with satisfaction. Half the galaxy is trying to get on our good side, and the other half is too scared to do anything hostile. A priority message arrived from Earth. Chancellor Wu Jin-John appeared on their screen, his expression carefully neutral despite the circumstances. Ambassador Park, the Chancellor began, I've been briefed on your presentation to the Council. The response has been intense. Every embassy on Earth is requesting meetings. Our communication networks are overloaded with diplomatic inquiries. And? Taemin asked. Chancellor John's poker face cracked slightly, revealing a hint of a smile. And our defense contractors are reporting a 3,000% increase in purchase orders. Apparently everyone wants to buy human military technology now that they know it exists. The irony wasn't lost on any of them. By revealing humanity's capacity for war, Taemin had likely secured more lasting peace than any diplomatic treaty could have achieved. There have been some complications, the Chancellor continued. 3 species have requested immediate asylum on Earth, claiming they're afraid of retaliation from their neighbors. The Naga government has officially disavowed Councillor Vex Hara and is requesting a private meeting to discuss historical misunderstandings. And someone leaked your speech to the galactic media. It's gone viral across 400 systems. Taemin closed his eyes briefly. How viral? Children on distant worlds are playing humans and aliens in their schoolyards. There's a remix of your speech set to music that's topped the entertainment charts. And several universities have added human military history to their curriculum. The door chimed, and Ambassador Su Jin Bei entered without waiting for permission. Her usual diplomatic composure was strained, but there was something that might have been pride in her eyes. Taemin, she said without preamble, what you did was completely outside protocol. It violated every principle of careful diplomatic engagement we've followed for 50 years. He waited for the censure that was surely coming. It was also, Su Jin continued, the most effective diplomatic maneuver in human history. Congratulations. You just reshaped galactic politics with a single speech. Reports continued to flood in throughout the day. The Galactic Stock Exchange had suspended trading as investors tried to figure out which human companies were actually defense contractors in disguise. Several species had quietly upgraded their diplomatic security, apparently concerned about what other capabilities humans might have hidden. Most significantly, 3 different multi-species alliances had sent formal requests for humanity to join their mutual defense pacts, not as junior partners seeking protection, but as senior members whose participation would guarantee security. Look at this, Haiwan said, pulling up a detailed analysis from the Galactic Intelligence Service. They've been trying to reverse engineer human technology for decades, but they never understood what they were looking at. Our agricultural equipment includes automated manufacturing systems that could produce weapons. Our medical research includes biological containment protocols designed for warfare. Our exploration vessels are apparently overbuilt by a factor of 10 for any civilian purpose. So Young laughed, reading over her shoulder. They're just now figuring out that our peaceful colonization followed perfect military conquest patterns. Secure strategic positions, establish supply lines, build defensible installations, and maintain rapid deployment capabilities. We've been setting up the infrastructure for galactic domination while calling it peaceful expansion. The most unexpected response came from librarian Kethril. The avian being had spent the day in the archives, cross-referencing human activities with known military doctrines. Her message was both fascinated and horrified. Ambassador Park, she wrote, I've been reviewing human cultural exports, your entertainment, your literature, your games. You've been teaching the entire galaxy human strategic thinking without anyone realizing it. Military academies across hundreds of worlds are using human fiction as tactical manuals. Your children's games contain more sophisticated strategic concepts than most species war colleges teach. Taemin considered this. Humanity had been so focused on hiding their military capabilities that they'd never considered how their culture might reveal their nature. Every movie about heroic last stands, every book about brilliant strategies, every game about resource management and tactical thinking had been spreading human military philosophy across the galaxy. We've been accidentally indoctrinating them, he realized. No wonder they're so shocked. They've been learning to think like humans for decades without understanding what that meant. As the galactic day ended, Taemin found himself back in the observation deck, looking out at the stars. The same view that had seemed peaceful yesterday now carried different implications. Somewhere out there, entire species were reassessing their place in the universe. A soft chime announced an incoming message. To his surprise, it was from High Arbiter Quindal himself. "Ambassador Park," the ancient being said, his crystalline voice carrying notes of exhaustion. "The Council has completed its emergency session. The censure against humanity has been withdrawn. Furthermore, the Council has voted unanimously to offer humanity a permanent seat on the Security Board, with full military consultation privileges." Taman wasn't surprised. "And what does the Council expect in return?" "Your continued restraint," Quindal replied simply. "Your promise that humanity will continue to choose diplomacy over other options. Today we learned that the galaxy's peace has been dependent on human goodwill for 50 years. We would like to ensure that arrangement continues." After the connection closed, Tae-min sat in silence for a long time. Outside, the diplomatic station continued its slow rotation, and representatives from hundreds of worlds went about their business. But with a new understanding of the universe they lived in, he thought about Vex Hara's words 3 days ago. War-Dreadin. She had meant it as an insult, a sign of weakness. Now the entire galaxy understood what humans had always known, that the greatest warriors are those who choose not to fight. His personal communicator buzzed with a message from So Young. "The next council session should be interesting. I don't think anyone's going to question human commitment to galactic security anymore." Taman smiled for the first time in days. He had gambled everything on a single moment of truth, and it had worked. Humanity's careful facade of peaceful weakness was gone forever, replaced by a reputation for dangerous restraint. The galaxy would never look at humans the same way again. And that, he reflected, was exactly what they had needed. Peace through strength wasn't just a philosophy, it was a promise. And now everyone understood that humanity was very, very good at keeping promises.